and second the approval of that. So if we could just perhaps share the minutes on screen. So we'll just hold a moment while Holly does that for us. Excellent. So I'm just going to go through page by page, and if anybody's got any concerns about accuracy, factual accuracy, then please put it in the chat, in the question and answer, and we can then make sure that we make those amendments. So first of all, at page 1, which is principally about overall attendees, and we have an additional list of the attendees from members. And please can we go on to page 2? So page 2 is about the work of the board and the Treasurer's report. Thank you. And page 3, which was around our election of trustees and appointment of our auditors, and took us into the wonderful panel discussion we had with Nadine Montgomery, James Titcombe and Suzanne White. And page 4. And then page 5, and this took us, of course, into a very rich discussion that we had with all of you. And page 6. So can I ask, thank you, Holly, if you'd like to stop screen sharing, and then what I would like to do is to ask somebody to propose and approve for approval of the records, and somebody else to second that. I think we've got approval from Fiona Brown. Is there anybody else who's one of our trustees? Is there anybody that will second that for us, please? Just waiting. I'm sure that will come through in a moment. So I'm going to, oh, here we go. So Suzanne White has seconded it, one of our other trustees. Thank you. So that's the minutes of our last meeting. And actually, when I read back on those minutes, preparing for this meeting today, and reflected on that discussion, which was the start of our journey around our new strategy, it was really helpful reading that discussion again and thinking about how important it is that we've now got this new strategy. And we're going to talk, and that's what we're going to really focus on today, because we really want to talk a bit more, because now we've got clearer ideas about what we're doing, and we really want your involvement in that as well. So I've got a couple of slides. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, I can promise you, but just to be able to give you some highlights. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the work of the board, and then Rachel I'll hand over. I think I then go to the Treasurer for his report, and then Rachel will talk about the work of the organisation and the team and what they've been doing over the year. And then that will take us into a discussion with you about when you hear what the plans are for our strategy, True Patient Partnership, how you can be involved. So really looking forward to that. Okay, so if I could have the next slide. So that just sets out what we're going to, so here we go. So this is, oops, that's lovely. Just keep it there. That's perfect. So for our Board of Trustees, so this is our annual general meeting reflecting on the year 2020. So our financial year works from January to January. So this is reflecting back on last year, which was during the almost for full 9 months of that year, of course, was the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have a number of trustee changes. We welcome Rachel King and Julie Talon, who are two new trustees who joined us in March. We lost two trustees last year, so we went out to recruit, and Rachel and Julie joined us, and we are really thrilled that they've been able to join us. They came to our board meeting in March. They've already got stuck in and got involved in the work of the association. Rachel's helped with some of the recruitment, and Julie's been helping with some of the work on shared decision making, which Rachel, I'm sure, will mention later. But just to give you a little bit, you'll have seen their bios, but Rachel is working with the international charity an international charity for multiple sclerosis, but brings a background particularly in media and insight and engagement. So that's really important to us to have that expertise on the board as we take forward our strategy. And Julie comes with a background of a career as an NHS leader and originally a nurse, Julie's recently retired, but remaining very active, and has told us how important it means to her to be able to focus on what patients want and not have to worry about all of the other distractions of managing a service. So we're really delighted. But very sadly, we say goodbye to 2 further trustees. So Dave Taylor who's our vice chair, and has also brought digital expertise, which has been so important, particularly as the way services are provided, and you've seen this through the pandemic, are starting to look much more at digital solutions. So Dave's expertise and advice to us has been really valuable. But Dave is coming to the end of his 2nd term, so his 2nd 3-year term. That will be in October. So our October board meeting will be his last meeting with us. So we're very sad to say goodbye to Dave, and we wish him well, and we thank him so much for all that he has brought. And Dave is the one trustee that's still in place from when I started, so because of the way people's terms have gone. So but very sad to say goodbye. And then Archie Norton, who's only been with us for 3 years. Archie's done 1 term as a trustee, but feels for personal reasons he doesn't want to do a 2nd term, but he has worked extremely hard during that first term of 3 years, and particularly in the last 18 months or so, took on chair of the governance committee and has steered that excellently and held everybody to account and made sure that we have kept a clear focus on where our policy work should be, what consultations we've responded to, and an oversight of our projects. So Archie has brought a very different view with his background in the airline service and airline safety. So we're sad to say goodbye, but we do hope that both Dave and Archie will remain members and will keep in touch with us. So the key things that we have really had to think about during this year, as I've mentioned several times, has been how we've responded to COVID-19. And one of the things that we needed to do, and Rachel will talk about how she supported the team to keep working through the pandemic, but really as a board we have been very thankful to Rachel and the team that they have managed to keep working. Everything went online. We were able to continue to do our focus groups and engagement and respond to requests for the need to hear the patient voice through online arrangements. And I hope that some of those of you attending today may well have been part of that. Doesn't suit everybody, but it certainly helped us learn how to use that online approach, just as everybody else has had to learn during these last 18 months. We also needed to strengthen our governance and decision making, because at the start we just didn't know how COVID would hit us. So we formed an additional subcommittee of about 6 trustees so that we could support Rachel and the team as they had to act quickly to think about what the impact might be for us. But I think when you hear from our treasurer, what we'll be very pleased to see is that actually, unusually for a lot of charities, because of the nature of the way we work, and that we don't have charity shops, or we're not reliant on fundraising out in the street for our sources of income, we've managed to stay fairly steady through the pandemic. So that's been a huge relief, because all of us feel that the work of this association is so important in making sure that patients' voice is heard. And particularly at a time when the NHS has had to act swiftly to change how it works, and we all understood that. But what we know from what we've heard from all of you telling us what your experience of the pandemic has been, that actually it's really important that the NHS doesn't forget to continue to listen to patients and involve us and to work in partnership with us as it resets and recovers from the pandemic. And the other key area of work that I just want to highlight to you was our new 5-year strategy. So we talked about that last time when we met last December. We had just trying to think of my years. Yes, we'd finished we've been doing the work through 2020 to develop the strategy, and it was launched early this year. And I think the board has been really delighted with the work that a group of trustees and some of the management team did to pull this strategy together. And what it's meant is that we've all got a really clear message around where we're headed and what we're focusing on. And I certainly find when I'm out as an ambassador for the association at various meetings, or if I'm meeting with particular individuals or senior leaders, knowing that what we want to focus on is true partnership with patients, whether that's around shared decision making and and having real partnership with your clinicians in how you're involved in decisions about your care, or whether it's about how patients are really involved in how services or pathways of care are going to be redesigned, that we really have true partnership. And what we're focused on now is the work to implement that, so that we really become to be seen as experts in this area and called upon to provide our expertise and advice, but also that we use that expertise and advice to also campaign and make sure that it becomes a reality. So it's really a very exciting time for us, I think, in our work. And I hope that you'll feel that too as you hear more about it and how you can get involved. So my second slide, please. So during this year, some of the things that we want to really continue to work on. So as part of developing and implementing this new strategy, there's a real focus from the trustees challenging the management team on how they're going to work to continue to increase and diversify our membership. We've done very well in increasing our membership over the last few years. I can't remember exactly, but I know I can't remember if it's over 2,000 or 3,000, but Rachel will clarify that when she talks, I'm sure. But really, we're very pleased about that. But there's still further to go for us to really feel that we are speaking with a voice across a broad membership. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other is how we strengthen the voice of our members, of you, in the work of the association and at the board. So how we hear what you're telling us, so that we can make sure that we are implementing our strategy of patients in partnership in a way that's doing the things that's going to make a difference to you, but also how we use that to then speak up at a national level to influence national policy. And Rachel will talk about how that's happened and the work that we've been doing about that when she comes on to that. And then finally, but not in any way, not an important way, has been our journey to financial sustainability. So last year when COVID struck, we'd had a financial plan to really get us back to a break-even position and to start to build up our financial reserves. So we were really worried when COVID happened that we were going to be knocked off course. But I'm delighted to say that actually, for all the reasons that I've said earlier, and for the hard work of our team, and particularly Rachel, who's been out there online engaging with different stakeholders to get people interested in and wanting to work with us and support us, we have continued to be able to deliver on that financial plan that we put in place last year. But I won't say any more about that because that's really the role of the treasurer, and he's much better at talking about figures than I am. So that's all I wanted to say at this stage, because I want to tell you about what we've been up to, but I also want us to have plenty of time to talk about our strategy and how we're going to implement it. So I think at this point I'm going to be handing over to Isaac, our treasurer, if he's there, and move on to the next slide. Sorry, perhaps I'm handing over to Rachel first of all. I beg your pardon. I'm handing over to Rachel, who's going to talk about the last year from the management perspective, and then we'll come on to the finances from Isaac. Rachel, over to you.
Lucy, thank you so much. And I won't take up too much time with this either. I suppose just really to give you a snapshot of what we achieved during 2020 and during the pandemic. At the start of the pandemic, we spent a lot of time reviewing all the resources that we had online and ensuring that we could keep patients up to date on what was happening with the various different measures in place. And that often meant with our head of policy being up very late in the evening and updating, as we heard from Prime Ministers, from the Prime Minister, as to the next stages of lockdowns and shielding. It meant also that we were able to take some of the calls that we were getting, and I'll talk about the calls to our helpline, and take those to NHS England to talk about where people were concerned about shielding. Should they be shielding? Should they not be shielding? We found that the download of those resources was very high over the last year or so, and that from our analysis of it, that people were staying there and reading those resources, so they were of benefit to patients, and we got that feedback as well. We did get home, and we're still at home. We hope to be going back to a blended model of working for the first few months as we as a country recover from the pandemic. But I have to say, with huge credit to the team, and especially the helpline team, we moved home at 5 o'clock one evening, and at 9 o'clock the next morning we were taking calls to support patients who were very concerned about what was happening in the pandemic. At that stage, we were hearing so much about patients that we thought that we really needed to pull this together into a report, and we developed our pandemic patient experience report. And we followed that up this year, and we were delighted to see that at the earlier in the last couple of months, the 2 calls within those reports around face-to-face access to GPs had been listened to by NHS England and had been restored. But it gave us a lot of information, which I then used in the various meetings that we were with NHS England, E&I, around making sure that they were hearing what patients were telling them during the pandemic, so that we could, because one of the things that we were very concerned about at the time was that this massive transformation that happened at the start of the pandemic, whilst needed, did so without involving patients. And I felt that the role of the Patient Association with trustees and staff last year was to make sure that at all stages we were telling the NHS E&I what patients were experiencing and what they were feeling. And we continue to this date using those reports to make sure that we can talk to NHS E&I around communications and principles around communications and working with local systems, and of course looking at the issue, having just been on an NHS Assembly call this morning around inequalities and what was highlighted during the pandemic for that. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So we took all this information. Our helpline and information service was extremely busy during the year, and we took over 2,500 calls on our helpline. I'm not going to read these numbers out because I can see the people can see the slides, but a lot of the issues were around access to services and getting services, and access to some online services as well. And throughout the year, we took this information to make sure that we brought this to the key players to make sure, and actually our relationship with a lot of key players, including the GMC, NHS E&I, became pretty much daily contact, saying this is what we're hearing on our helpline, and can we turn this around? And it resulted in some people getting more support around their shielding. And for a helpline, it was us learning an awful lot more about what was happening and rapidly happening overnight, as you'll all appreciate. So, making sure that we could signpost people to mutual aid groups, making sure that we were up to date on where those mutual aid groups were and what they could do to support patients, and especially those patients who weren't finding themselves on shielded lists as well. We used our weekly news as well, and we're delighted that by the end of 2020 there was over 2,000 subscribers. And off the top of my head, I really can't tell you the open rate, which I should have had in front of me, but it's extremely high, and so that we really feel that people are benefiting from it, and other organisations are giving us really good feedback about how they're managing to find patients who are willing to get involved in pieces of work from them, and that comes from the NMC and a couple of different organisations saying that the uptake of calls in our weekly newsletter has resulted in them being able to engage with patients in a much better way. So that's a really good outcome for us. Lucy talked about the beginning of COVID-19 and the support that I got from trustees, which was because I was extremely worried. One of the main role of the Patient Association is that we can listen and hear what patients are telling us, and we do that through our helpline and our information service, but we also do that through the work of our focus groups and our surveys. And I'm sure all of you've heard of survey fatigue, and I have to say to our members, thank you so much, because it's one thing that we haven't seen from our membership, and the engagement with our questions and our inquiries has been great. But also we were worried about how to do focus groups. And we had a large program planned for COVID-19 last year, and COVID-19 hit, but actually they all went online and they've worked really, really well. And what we need to do now going forward is thinking about how we can do that blended piece of work. But throughout all of that, we engaged in excess with 3,000 patients during a period when we were working from home, trying to find ways to work from home. I personally am a person who likes sitting in front of a computer all day, and that lack of human interaction that we all have missed so much. But we did it, and from there we were able to make sure that the voice of patients were heard during the pandemic, and now we work very closely to make sure that the voice of patients and patient partnership, as we rebuild or reset or whatever the language of getting services back online, which is going to be a huge challenge for all. So that's just giving you a snapshot. I think I have one more slide to go through. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are just to give you an example. So I've talked about being a patient and the patient experience program. And again, that gets us into doors to talk about how do we measure the experience, you know, what is patient experience and what matters to individual patients. And the conversation that we had 2 years ago at our AGM is still a major issue for patients in terms of shared decision making. And in the next week or so, we'll be issuing a large report around shared decision making and the experiences of patients in shared decision making, and in there again there will be more recommendations for how we're going to bring that forward. I chair the All Can UK group, and we have one of the things that came out again during a study during COVID-19 was the Out of Sight, Not Out of Mind campaign that looks at looking at the whole person who is just had a cancer diagnosis or is going through cancer treatment, or who is in recovery post cancer treatment, but just making sure that we really work on the mental health care during that period, and that there is an holistic program wrapped around the whole person. And again, we're working in partnership with a number of organizations on there. We continue to work. We were seconded to do some work on the food review, Department for Health's food review last year. It got delayed as a result of COVID, but it has come out and it talks about the need for good, high nutrition, quality food, but also attractive food. And again, that's about looking at the whole patient and looking at what patients need when they're in hospital. And that work continues. So as members, you'll hear more about that in the next few weeks, because we continue to be involved there. Again, we did a lot of calls last year, which we believe through the invitations that we've had to join different recovery task groups within NHS and ENI around involving patients during the COVID-19 pandemic, what patients were hearing, and what we want about true patient partnership. But we're going to go into that and patient involvement in the restart or reset of NHS services. So I think all that we did last year has set us in very firm footing this year, because our voice is welcomed at the table. They want to hear from us, and they genuinely want to try and get patients involved. But what we have to try and do is make sure that that is done at a partnership level rather than just a basic involvement level. But I will talk about more about that shortly. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Rachel. And so what I'm going to do just before we go over to Isaac is just to stop there for a moment in case there are any questions that people want to ask in the question and answer box, and we can answer about some of the work that's been going on. And we will take questions and answers again after the Treasurer's report, in case when people will want to ask about the finances. But just while I'm waiting, because people might be typing questions in, hopefully. But what you see from that last slide, really, I think is Rachel said, is a snapshot of some of the work. And again, I think the trustees are very proud of the way that the team have been able to continue to speak up for patients through all of this time. And when you look at the sorts of issues that they have been speaking up about, or we've been getting you or other members involved in focus groups about, I find it I'm really heartened. I think that when I first arrived as a trustee, I sometimes wasn't sure why about some of our project work, but when I see the project work we're doing now, it looks to me like it's all things that are such important issues for patients, both in terms of your experience if you're in hospital, but also your experience if you're trying to access care in the community. So I think that, and I hope that you'll feel as well, that that a lot of our project work now is really about the things that matter to you. And certainly that's the sort of thing that we want to hear more from you about, is, you know, what are the things that you would like to see us working on. So we will be coming out to ask you about that with a further member survey. We've just been talking about it and trying to make sure it's not too long, so that none of you will be put off from responding to it, because I know there's nothing worse than starting a survey thinking, oh yes, I'll help with this, and then thinking, oh no, question 12, I'm not sure if I can do much more. So really hoping for that. And the last thing, just while don't seem to be any questions and answers, but certainly I think one of the things that we have really done, that the team have done really effectively, is the work we did to survey you and all our members about your experience of the pandemic, both last year and this year. And that has been so important for the NHS to hear, that whilst we understood that they needed to stop all main services, they just didn't know, after they'd seen those dreadful pictures in Italy, how it was going to hit in this country. And I think there's learning that, you know, because clearly in the second wave they were able to keep more services going, but despite that, what you and other patients have told us is how abandoned you felt. And that people, you know, understood that they needed to have their appointments were cancelled, but then, you know, there wasn't further communication then as things calmed down to let you know when services would restart and when you might be seen. And that's something that we continue to speak up about, that some people are getting information, but not everybody. And whilst people know they're going to have to wait longer for treatment, what we believe really is that people really need to be told what's the likely waiting time and how can you look after yourself and keep yourself healthy and well whilst you're waiting that longer period for your treatment to start. So no questions and answers at this stage. I think you're saving it all up for the discussion about our strategy. So I'm going to ask Isaac, our treasurer, to tell you about our financial position, which I think is a very positive story to tell. Isaac, over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. Can you all hear me? I think I do have to make an apology because I'm having internet problems. So I'm actually using my phone. Now, we've listened to the chair and to the chief executive in terms of what was achieved in the previous year. Financially speaking, it has been quite challenging for us. As you could see, we started off with a reserve of £114,000, which really is quite small. But then we knew that we've got a 5-year strategy coming up and we had to prepare ourselves for that. So we worked very hard in the year to make sure that our income is more than what we had in the previous year. And the income came in at £471,000. But of course, we had to balance that with expenditure, knowing fully well that we had to do a good thinking on going forward. So we curtailed our expenditure by keeping down staff vacancies and reduced the expenditure to just over £400,000, which of course gave us a surplus of £62,000 compared to the previous year where we made a loss of £27,000. This in itself enabled us to increase our reserves to £177,000 and puts us in a very strong position as a going concern organization and one that is looking forward to delivering on the strategy which we are about to embark upon. So that's the short top-level summary of our finances. Details available on request or when it's filed at the Companies House or Charities Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. So I'm going to just ask people if they've got any questions or answers about our financial position. And again, while I'm just looking to see if there are any questions or answers at all, really to say that, as Isaac said, that the team kept expenditure down by holding a number of vacancies last year, and thinking that particularly that it probably wasn't a good time to be recruiting during the pandemic as well. Very hard for people joining a new organisation when you have to do that completely online. But we still have plans for the future to maintain that reserve position and to strengthen it, as well as being able to recruit staff, because we do need to have people in post to be able to do the work that we want to do to make a difference for patients. So I don't think there's been, so no questions, I don't think, at this stage about the finances. If you have questions that follow on about this and you want to pick them up later, you can do. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel to talk about how we're going to implement the strategy, particularly the plans for the first year of the strategy. And I think she'll also introduce you to some of our new members of staff who are going to be helping with that. So Rachel, over to you.
Sorry, the mute button wouldn't turn off for me. It's a saying of 2021, you're on mute. Can we see the next slide, Holly? So we have to do the membership voting first, Lucy?
Oh yes, sorry, my mistake. And I've got my notes in front of me. I'm so excited about talking about the strategy.
I know, it's the future.
Absolutely. So in terms of our membership voting, so we've got two, so as I said at the start, we have two new trustees, Rachel King and Julie Talon, who need to be voted in. And we have two trustees we need to vote in for their second term, and that is Isaac Agberadu, our treasurer, and Fiona Brown, one of our trustees as well. So Rachel, can I hand over to you to tell us about, because I think the voting's all been done online or by post. So can you just confirm that we've had voting to support those amendments to our board?
So the voting was done in two ways. We have a number of members who want postal voting, so and then online voting. So both were done to achieve the preferences under GDPR of the members. So we had four different resolutions. The first resolution was to receive and approve the report and accounts, and we had 76 votes to approve, 5 to abstain, 4 didn't fill in the form, and 2 against. We had to approve the election of the honorary treasurer because that's a yearly appointment, and we had 75 votes to approve Isaac in the role of honorary treasurer. The appointment, resolution 3, was to approve the appointment of McIntyre Hudson as our auditors and to authorise trustees directors to fix their remuneration, and we had 74 votes for that, and these were out of a total of 87 votes. Resolution 4A was to approve the re-election of Fiona Brown as a trustee, and we had 72 votes in favour. Resolution 4B was to approve our new trustee Rachel King, of which we had 69 votes in approval, and 4C to approve the election of Julie Talon, and we had 69 votes.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was the end of our voting. I feel like I'm the, it's like the Eurovision.
Yes, the Eurovision without the music and the
Maybe we'll get them to sing.
I hope you're not expecting me to do that. Thank you. Okay, so that's great news, and thank you all to all of our members who participated in the voting, because it really matters to us as trustees that we do have your support as members in the work that we do, supporting the organisation and overseeing the work and bringing challenge and advice to the management team. So now I think I am allowed to say that we can go on, and Rachel can talk to you about our future strategy, and what we're planning to do over the next few years, but particularly in the coming year.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. So Lucy talked about a new strategy during her presentation and the way that we developed it through COVID-19 and online on a Zoom over 4 afternoons, which was a tough call, but we got there. So thank you to trustees that were involved in supporting that and the leadership team. We then tested it with our members, and thank you so much to members who completed our surveys and gave us some really good indications in which we built the business plan from, and of which I am talking to lots of different health and care professionals about the need to enable and empower patients to be true partners in their care. So without reading this but it's about services being designed and delivered through equal partnership with patients, and our shared decision-making piece of work will help with this, but it's something that we've been using quite a lot this year and will continue to use to really try get this to be a real reality for patients across the board, regardless of their background or location. So to do that, Lucy is right. We held posts last year, but what she's right about it is very, very different to onboard new staff members on Zoom, but we're doing it. And if we move on to the next slide. We have appointed 2 new staff members to support the current team. So to join our leadership team as the head of policy and our head of programs, we've appointed Maya, who's our head of comms and marketing, and we will be writing out to tell you a little bit more about Maya, and Sarah Tilsad, who is our head of patient partnership, who is going to join me for the next couple of slides. Here she comes. All very slick, and in the background here is Holly and Natasha, who are both new part-time members of staff supporting our admin and are doing a fantastic job of keeping this AGM running as smoothly as possible. So thank you. So Sarah, welcome again formally on here. So if we go into the next slide, please, Holly. So the aims for the next couple of years of our strategy is to diversify and engage you as our members in a much better way. And we're going to be writing out to ask you more questions about that, but also in engaging you, how do we ensure that members are as involved in the work of the Patients Association as they really want to be? So, you know, ideally there's meetings that I go to sometimes and I think, wow, it'd be so good to have patients here with me, and I know I'm patient too, but just to make sure that we can involve you better in the work that we're doing and see how we can move our work up that engagement ladder further than but surveys and focus groups are great, but there's more that we can be doing. And that's something that Sarah and I and Maya will be working on with the rest of the team. When we wrote out and to you as members back in September, October last year, what you said was, yeah, actually patient partnership, we completely get what you're going to try and do and we're happy with that, but actually we need to be empowered to take an active role in our care. And it comes up time and time again. I was on a call this morning with the NHS Assembly, and we talk about co-production and we talk about shared decision making, and we use all this language and we talk about prevention, but actually we really need to get to a place that we're speaking language that we all really understand what it means, and that's part of the work that we need to do with patients so that together we can develop toolkits, strategies, training. I don't know what the right thing is, but so that actually patients feel empowered to take as an active role as they wish to take in their own health and care, and then how we can develop that role to be really involved in the design and delivery and evaluation of services that are there to support patients with their care. And then we want to outreach and partner more diverse patient groups. And there are a lot of patient groups out there that we are working well with, but there's an awful lot out there that we're not working as well with as I would like to do. And one of the things that Sarah's already started to do is that whole stakeholder, you know, there's a lot of really active groups, and one of the things I was involved in as part of my role, but personally, was with getting a grant set up last year, where a lot of companies came together. And what I really spoke to them about was, you know, don't forget about those small little groups that are looking at working together with people with diabetes, or people who are working with different strokes and local. They were the ones who couldn't have their coffee mornings last week and last year and do those things that used to bring money in, just to provide that companionship. And, you know, we saw the great advent of mutual aid groups, but actually a lot of those groups were there before the pandemic. And what I was trying to get this fund to work with was to make sure that those groups existed for patients after the pandemic. And I think they're the diverse patient groups that I really want us to reach out a lot more to. And Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to add to this first slide before?
No, I think you've done an excellent job of explaining everything. I was thinking, oh, what has she missed? But you've covered absolutely everything. So no, thank you, Rachel.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Well, we're going to go on to the next slide. So, you know, what we want to get to is that we have training and resources to ensure, but also healthcare professionals. And one of the very you know, heads up in terms of the shared decision making is, you know, what's happening at curriculum. If shared decision making isn't working right now for all patients, because sometimes clinicians find it very challenging to do shared decision making, so we need to do something that we co-produce with healthcare professionals and patients to look at what does that patient partnership look like and how shall we approach it. But to do that, first of all, we need to know a little bit more from you as our members, and we want to engage you so much more in this group. One of the first things we're going to do is set up an advisory, a lived experience advisory panel, and we'll be sending out more information to you very shortly on that. But in the meantime, Sarah, do you want to tell a little bit more about the survey that you and Maya have been creating?
Yeah, of course. Oh, just as an alarm's going past. Apologies, I live in East London. So Maya and myself are working on a membership survey at the moment. It is still in draft form, but we really want to get the views of all of our members. We want to know how to grow the membership. We want to know how to diversify the membership. And obviously you, the patients, and our members are the people who will know how to do that best. And so we really want you to be engaged in every process along the way of this, and just use your expertise, really. We're going to be well, we don't know when we're going to be sending out yet, but we'll make sure we put it on social media and through our newsletter. So hopefully that should be with you within the next few weeks. And as Lucy said, we're trying to make sure that it's not too long. I've put a few too many questions in there at the moment, but we're just trying to condense that a little bit at the moment.
Maybe we're just really excited about all the areas that we know we want to get feedback about membership, and it's something we've been wanting to do for the last year. So that's probably why the survey went a little bit too long, because you and Maya are here now, and I keep saying, can we ask? We need to know more about this. We need to know more about this. We need to know.
We do. Yeah, exactly.
We do need all those.
Yes.
And we do need all those things.
Yeah.
But maybe Lucy's right, not in one very, very long survey.
Yes.
So I think Lucy's going to come back in, and I think we'll just try and have a chat about, you know, the patient partnership strategy. But absolutely, you know, is there any questions you want to ask of us? Is there any ideas that you have? Like, what we will do is we are going to have a larger engagement event later in the year. I wanted to do it now, but with 4 new staff members, I really wanted to make sure that I had onboarded them and made sure that they were feeling very, very supported. And it is a difficult time for new staff to join, like we spoke about. So this is not the one event of the year. This is a event of the year. And once we get the membership survey back and analysed, I'd like to set up another meeting with members so that we can have a chat with what they are and what the survey results are telling us and what we're going to do about it, more importantly. And we also then want to have a larger engagement later in the autumn, which will look very much, and I want this to be co-produced, and here I am using the language co-produced that I just gave out about, but I want to work with some excellent healthcare professionals who are really quite willing and really excited about the work the Patient Association is trying to do in partnership, and look at places like Wigan where it's working really, really well, and have an event then. So we'll have a much more interactive event then, hopefully with much more substance to what we're telling you about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'm just making sure that I'm visible and can be heard now. But I hope you found that interesting. I'm just so excited about it. You know, as I said when I started at the beginning, when I go into meetings or to meet senior leaders, whatever now, being really clear that what we want to see change and happen is real patient partnership at those levels, means that I feel I have a really clear message about what this association is there for, and what members want to see happen, and that patient partnership can make such a difference at whichever level you look at, whether you're talking about, as we've said, shared decision making, or whether, you know, a service is thinking about how they're going to re-provide the way they provide diabetes services and the clinics and so on. And if they don't really design that with patients, then they'll have something that perhaps works a bit better for the professionals, but doesn't really make a difference to you. So that's so important. And even when we get to talk about things, as you know, the other area that we've always been very passionate about in Patients Association is how the NHS really starts to listen when they receive complaints and involve people, and listen to your concerns, and then really involve you in the investigation, respond well. That's patient partnership too. So patient partnership takes us across really what we need to do across all of the things that have been priorities for us as an association over the many years that this organisation has been in existence. So it feels really exciting to me, and it takes us into the things that we really need to be doing to make a difference for you and for all patients. And this pandemic, as I said earlier, has shown us how it's important that if patients aren't involved, as people start to think about, services start to think about continuing to have services online, you know, do video consultations for our patients. You know, we support that. We know that's great for lots of people and will really make a difference to them. But there are other people that just really can't manage and can't cope with having a consultation through a screen, or other people who actually can't manage to have a consultation through a screen because they haven't got space where they can be private away from the rest of their family. So there are so many things that you've told us that services need to think about if they want to take those sorts of changes forward. So patient partnership again is absolutely key to making those differences. So I can't see any other questions and answers, but I think I'm going to ask a question, and I want to ask, I don't know whether it's Rachel or Sarah wants to answer this, but we talked about getting a sort of patient panel or a patient forum, you know, group of people who we can support and develop to work with us. And I just wondered if you'd like to say a little bit more about that, because I think that's so exciting, because there are often times when we get invitations to do things, and it's not always something that we can just go out on weekly news to find people. Whereas if we had some of those of you who we've supported to be able to attend those meetings, come and really talk about what it's like from your perspective, that would make such a difference. Rachel, do you want to say just a little bit more about that?
Sorry, Lucy, you broke up slightly. Can you just repeat the question to me?
Yes, sorry. I was saying, could you tell people a little bit more? The thing that I'm really interested in is the work, I can't remember what we're calling it, but to develop a patient panel or a patient forum, in a group of expert patients who we will support and develop, as you said, to be able to attend particular meetings, or to be able to be engaged in our work and be ambassador. Maybe ambassador is the wrong word, but to be able to provide for our membership to be more involved. Do you want to just say a little bit more about how we're going to go about that?
Yeah, again, the membership will help tell us a lot of this, because they said they want to be involved, and we need to work out in what way they would like to be involved, and we need to make sure that we are doing partnership internally about how we work. But initially, the first thing, one of the things that I found and that we didn't have in the organisation, and now that Sarah's on board, we can do it, is what I wanted was that lived experience and a panel that I could go to, and panel may not be the right word, so forgive me. And, you know, it's a group of people that I can walk into the room and go, okay, this is my dream. This is our dream as a patient association that we're going to achieve through patient partnership. And, you know, we know that there's massive inequality, so we want to get people to come from a wide variety, because, you know, from a health inequalities point of view, the power is in the wrong place long before the NHS is starting to get involved. But what we want to do is to change that power dynamic, to say, okay, this is what I think we want to do. This is what our members have said we want to do. How do we do it? And let people tell us their stories about how and where it's worked. And so we're going to do a pilot of that, and we're going to be going out to recruit to members, and we're going to make sure we're so lucky as an organisation, because when we do go call out for focus groups or whatever we're going to call this, the lived advisory panel, we do get overwhelmed with inquiries, and what we want to make sure is this is a really wide spectrum of people from a geographical background, from a BAME background, and just so that we are really listening to all of those. And what we want to do as an organisation is really share the power. Because as a chief executive and as a trustee of the Patient Association, we can go out and we can talk on behalf of what we hear from and listen from patients and what we hear from them. But what we want to do is change that power and enable those patients to come out and do it. And ideally, with some of the smaller local patient charities, I want us to become part of them. Now, that's a really hard thing to do, because you need to get out in the street and you need to walk, and we're 10 people in the middle of London. So I need to think, Sarah and I need to think this one through quite a bit. But, you know, you need to get that kind of bridge builder. And you talked about ambassadors. What we really need is those big bridge builders from different communities who will really tell us their message about what happens when their community, and we become part of that community by hearing those messages, so that when we are speaking up, we speak up for that wide ranging views across the health divides that are in the country. Sarah, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
No, I don't think so. That was a really good explanation. I think, as you said earlier, if we're going to meetings and we don't have patients with us, how are we representing the voices of patients when it's just us speaking on behalf of someone? And then if there is a conversation at the meeting, we can't answer on behalf of them because the patient isn't there. So I think it's really important to have this lived experience advisory panel, and especially if there's a specific topic or particular background that we would love to hear the views of patients from, then that's when we can go to, you know, our plethora of communities and say, okay, well, they want someone from an LGBT background or BAME, whatever it may be, and then they can go to the event or the meeting and can actually speak about their experience rather than us speaking for them.
And Sarah, you're completely right, because the amount of times as in this role at the Patient Association that I've been invited to come to meetings, and I sit in a room and I go, no, but I don't know. You know, they'll go, but you tell us what patients think. And I'm like, I don't know, because I didn't ask them this question. And, you know, so we have to be really careful as an organisation that we're not brought into the room and being the tokenistic kind of patient in the room. So we're very strong as an organisation in saying, sorry, we haven't actually asked patients that question, and we haven't engaged, and we need to engage. And if you want to do engagement properly with patients, that's not just about inviting us into the room. And I think people are very clear that that's who we are as an organisation now.
Thank you. Thank you both. And that's a really helpful sort of further discussion, because that's going to be such an important piece of work and way of working with you all as we go over the next year. Now we have got a question.
Somebody, sorry, Liz, just before you go on, somebody's just put a question in chat, and I know you've come back, but we may miss those questions. So if people can use Q&A, the Q&A box, but I think you've seen that one, but I'm just terrified we might miss some question in the chat box.
So John has raised a question about when I was talking about the NHS complaints process, and saying that what happens when the way the trust investigates and the complaints investigator investigates, that you as the person making that complaint start to feel under attack, and that your concerns are being ignored. And we would absolutely agree John, that's exactly the work we've done. We do two things really. One is our quality improvement work, when we do projects with NHS providers to help them with their complaints process and to talk with them about how to and use the tools and standards we've got, and help them to understand how to really listen to patients and how to understand things from their perspective and put themselves in their shoes. So that's one thing. We also go to various things. I've been chairing a complaints conference now for a number of years, which NHS complaints managers come to, and I use that as an opportunity to put our learning from what you've told us and share that with complaints managers, so that they really understand that what people might dismiss actually shouldn't be dismissed. It's often something that would make a real difference if they'd listened to you properly, and they could make some real changes. And I always say that most people aren't doing it to get financial compensation. They're raising a concern because they want to see the NHS to learn and improve, and other people not to have to go through what they're going through. And finally, the other bit is that we've worked with the team have worked with the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman on their new complaint standards. And so that's been a helpful area of work, and that's engaged the NHS further in thinking about what it needs to do. And we have been engaging with the Department of Health to say exactly as you say, that we think that some of the complaints, the regulations around complaints really need to be modernised and changed, because some of the language doesn't help really. So it's an ongoing improvement journey. Some areas of the NHS have made good improvements, but there's an awful lot of more progress to go. But thank you for raising that.
Lucy, in addition, we're also working with the Harmed Patient Alliance. Do
you want to talk about that, Ray?
Of years as well. So, John, I'm happy to let you have if you drop your email address, we can send you a link to the Harmed Patient Alliance, and that wants to look at the time of harm or injury to a member of family, that the whole family are looked at, and that there is a pathway that looks at looking after everyone, including the person who may have made a mistake or an injury, so that it starts at the very beginning.
Thank you. Now, I can't see any further questions, and where I live, it's a beautiful sunny day, so I'm sure people are very keen to get back out there in the sunshine and enjoy that. So I think what we'll do is probably bring the meeting to a close. We always plan this to be a slightly shorter meeting because we want to have a bigger event, as Rachel said, in the autumn. But Rachel, do you want to just say anything about sort of next steps? Just remind people about what they can expect to hear, when they can expect to hear from you, because that would be helpful.
So the next step will be that we will be sending all members a copy of our annual review, and that should land in your post if you're a member who likes things to be posted, or by email as a PDF if you are one of our members who like it to come by email. So that should land in your doorsteps in the next week to 10 days, and then following that, there will be a call to action for the membership survey and making sure that you can participate in that. And we will be in contact with you quite a bit around then, because we know what it's like to get an email in or to get a letter in and forget, think I'll do that tomorrow. But actually we're going to come out to you a couple of times, not to really pester you, but we really want this to be the starting point with Sarah and Maya in hand and post, that we can really hear those views. And then I think one of the things that, as a slight apology, because in the last year we haven't been doing the members newsletter, and we explained that to people, that through COVID and through the pulling back on staff resources, we had to focus on making sure that patients were being listened to, and that we were raising what we were hearing with the relevant authorities. So we'll be looking, and part of the survey will be looking at actually how do we communicate with you. But now that we have Sarah and Maya, and I'm delighted to the members who do feel that they can contact us and just give us ideas, and we love when we get your emails to say that you've heard what we had to say in the paper and you agree with us or you disagree with us, that you have a different point you want to make. So, let's really get that real involved membership going at the Patient Association.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So there are no further questions. I don't think so. No, there aren't. So that just leads me to thank all of you for joining us today and listen and to come and hear what we've been up to. And thank you in advance for all the involvement that you've had with us over the last year, and for that continued involvement that I know is going to come over the next year as we take forward this programme of work. And a big thank you to the team who have continued to work extremely hard through all of this difficult last year. And a big thank you to all of the trustees who have really provided that challenge, scrutiny and expertise that bring us together to be able to really produce the new strategy and be really clear on where we're going and what we need to think about to make sure we do it well. So thank you and goodbye.